you talking to Jamaal was very glorious to me, and for a lot of reasons. But that, to me, that video, if anybody needed a sign that that man has no inspiration or no real desire to fight for anything or do anything, that interview was very great. I appreciated that.
Yeah, it's tough because, taking it away from the realm of kind of what his personal desires are, which, I don't have any insight into, and which I think that he does, like he sees himself as someone who is fighting and who does want to fight. What I hope to accomplish with interviews like that is not to sort of like impugn his motives, but to say, like, you've literally reached out to me in the past asking what the next fight is. And it's clear that there's not a lot of strategic thinking within the squad. And worse than that, there's not really a willingness to act as a squad, so that when a strategic opportunity did arise and force the vote, they were obviously unwilling to take it up.
Yeah.
And so, I want to create a space where people like him will come and feel like they've been treated fairly. And I'm trying to call people in and encourage them to use the power and the platform that they have to actually advance the interests of the left and not just the interest of the Democratic Party. But, as you saw in that interview, sometimes what I think of as sort of persuasion doesn't really take, and we end up kind of at loggerheads at moments during which I really don't think we should have been at loggerheads, because we are ostensibly on the same side. But that does happen again and again in these sorts of interviews.
But we get that.
Ask questions where they're held accountable for their past behavior and held accountable for not using the power at their disposal.
That's the key thing, what you just said there. None of that, like in that interview, what I got, and just as somebody watching it, and I know Jamaal, I've met him, so it's not like I don't think he's like not a nice person or anything like that. But what I garnered from that interview was that he takes no accountability. It actually sounded like he was somewhat blaming Jimmy Dore, which I thought was ridiculous, and didn't take any accountability, and even the way that he was sitting when he was speaking to you, I found incredibly condescending. I don't know if you were like the body language, it didn't come off good for him. And in some ways, not for him, but for us, that's a service, because he is going to want to put himself out there again to get back into Congress, and people can watch that and be like, for what?
Yeah, it's a funny thing, because this is not the first time someone has come on the show who's either on the broad left or a liberal, and who doesn't necessarily appreciate how big the gap has gotten between sort of what came to be known in the interview as the adversarial left and themselves, and who clearly have not been consuming the same sort of media that we've been consuming, where we have a sort of forensic understanding of all of the ways that Democrats have abdicated their power and authority over the course of the Biden administration, especially during the first 2 years of the trifecta. And they find themselves, it feels to me on an emotional level, like they're genuinely surprised and hurt and confused to find themselves in a situation where someone's to their left. And frequently the reaction is anger. And it's interesting for me, because I'm certainly not the most radical left person in the world. And from time to time, when I've encountered people in online spaces and in real life who are to my left, I'm usually eager to learn from them to see if there are ways that I should modify my own position, because I value the left. I want to be to the left. And to the extent that I'm not where they are, it's probably because of my own ignorance. And I just challenge people to not have this sort of like ego provocation when they're in that situation, especially when you're someone with as much power as a former or sitting Congress member. I mean, to be clear, like if people haven't watched this interview, I never talked about it publicly because I wasn't sure if he was comfortable with that. He wasn't clear about whether it was an off the record conversation at the time, but he was willing to talk to me about it on the recent episode. And he called me, I can't remember exactly when, but some months after Force the Vote, literally asking me, at the time, someone with a podcast that was maybe 5 months old who was basically unemployed, what's next? And at that time, it became clear to me that the reason that he hadn't pursued the Force the Vote strategy was because he felt like people were being mean to his friend Alex. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And to me, like, that was almost the worst part then and now as we were rehashing it, because it cannot be that your desire to keep your job, it cannot be that your desire to protect the ego of your friends, coworkers, is superseding your willingness to be attentive to what was at the time a movement of people who were doing phone trees and organizing in-person events and trying their best to keep attention on Medicare for all in the middle of a pandemic, during which 15 million people who had just been thrown off their health insurance. And the idea that anybody would fix their lips to say Jimmy Dore or my friend Alex, when the scope of the tragedy was as big as it was at the time, was pretty dispiriting.
Yeah. Hey, Peter's here. We were talking about Bri's interview with Jamaal. And you're still frozen. Look, he's just frozen. At least you're frozen in a better position. He's in Vegas in a hotel room that has very bad Wi-Fi. And now you're on your phone and frozen.
Okay, anything?
We hear you, but you're frozen. It's not ideal. It's not good. We've got issues. Yeah. Well, you look kind of stoned, actually. I'm kind of liking that. It's a good look. Yeah, you got to go. We're having technical difficulty.
Yeah,
but I agree. And but I think it brings us to even where we are now with when people are asking Bernie, okay, so what's the plan? Yeah. Okay, you're going around and doing these rallies, this anti-oligarchy thing. Great, I'm with you. Let's go. What's the plan? And they're still now, they don't know. They're literally saying, we don't really know what to do with this. What should we do with our platform? What should we do? And if these people are asking, like if Jamaal's asking you and these people are asking us, I think it's safe to say that the answer is not going to be with them.